You go. All right. Welcome everyone to an education and motivation event hosted by You Define Wellness. I'm Denise O'Malley, the founder of the company, and I welcome you to a conversation that is going to be a little bit different than our normal education and motivation events that we have every month. This one came about because of Facebook. It came about because of a post I did on Facebook not all that long ago. And it ended up being a really lively discussion and debate just within my own timeline. But I asked the question out there about mental health. I was tired of hearing the news media, politicians, people on the street saying, we need to fix mental health. Okay, we do. Let's face it, we do. But what do we need? What's wrong with it? What do we need to fix? How do we go about fixing it? And what I knew is that I have this plethora of health and wellness professionals out there. And sure enough, they jumped on the conversation. They're sharing ideas. They're sharing their personal stories of having to deal with the mental health system for a loved one. But they're also dealing with their position as being an expert in whatever it is their modality is. And the discussion was so lively that one of the people in the conversation sent me a little note and said, wouldn't this make a really good topic for an education and motivation event? And I said, you know what? Yes, absolutely. And so our normal format that we do is thrown out the window today because I want to leave as much time as possible for us to be talking about this subject. So with us today, we have a variety of the providers who are in our network, and I'm going to ask all of you as you ask a question, make sure if it's your first time talking on this platform, please introduce yourself so we know who you are and what it is that you are doing. But I want to just jump right into this topic. So mental health is broken. What's broken about it? Thoughts? Who wants to be the first to go first? Natalie is. Okay.
Well, you said energy. So
yes.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Natalie Forrest. And just the way that you pose the question, I think shows what is broken, because we're saying mental health is broken. Mental health is not broken, but how we're dealing with each other is broken. The expectations that we put on people, those, I believe, are at the core of what we call the mental health problem. And just, of course, by calling it a problem, we're not looking for solutions. Because if we were looking for solutions, we would call it a challenge. There has been plenty of evidence that the words that we use when we have a challenge determine the outcome. Quick side note, war on drugs, we're still fighting. How about we change the wording? So it's always the way that we look at something. And it started way back when in the US, when a young lady decided to do something about people being pushed away into the basements and created the first idea of what we used to call an asylum. But she actually wanted to bring them out from behind the curtain to say, you know, these are still people. That's the mental health where we're saying, okay, you might need some additional help, some medication. That's different, though, from the general problem, at least the way that I see it. And I'm speaking from the perspective of having been a teacher, having been a coach, having been a mentor, being a mom, and having lived in a variety of countries across the globe. So I see differences. And I believe at the core of everything, and I had responded to your post about that as well, is really the way that we are not allowing people to be themselves, and we're just making them be busy all the time. So that's my first intro.
Okay. So we're talking about mental health challenges then, evidently. So Dina, you're jumping at this.
I'm jumping. I'm like,
in here.
Yes. Hi. First of all, I'm Dina Tibbs. So I'm a spiritual mentor and soul companion and a depth coach. Depth, not death. Although I do some grief work as well. And I was raised by a therapist. So I've lived with a therapist my entire life. I have a lot of folks that come to me who have severe mental illness, all along the trajectory, because they tell me that traditional therapy has never worked for them. And that is true for myself as well. And so in my view and in my experience, part of that is because, mental, you said it too in the language, we're cutting off our head and working from here up.
Mhm.
And then we work from here down with the body workers. And then maybe we have a spiritual mentor or someone to work on the soul level. But we're not, there are therapists that are transpersonal psychologists and Jungians that do work in those realms, but most people don't know about having access to those, and or those that work in those fields are in private practice and not accessible through insurance because what they do doesn't have a code attached to it, or they do not want to define somebody by, what the DSM says, and, labeling them. And I'm a big fan of James Hillman. He's written books around this soul code and how maybe some people who come onto the planet with some of these, if it's a biological mental illness, that is part of their soul work. And rather than trying to fix what's broken, we don't honor it. And then in addition to that, our disconnect from nature, from others, whether it's because of social, it's mental health problems have been around long before social media, but that has definitely exacerbated it. And then the lack of rites of passage for our youth, particularly in this country. I know that there's certainly indigenous peoples all around the world that still do rites of passage work. But here in the West, most people do not, for their kids, whether it's boy, girl, or any gender, to say, I'm moving through a life transition. We mark weddings and some of that stuff, but that often is much more about what's commercialized, and it's not about the deep work of the soul to say, I'm going to go off into the wilderness and come back with not only my medicine but medicine for my people.
Mhm.
And then, again, there are wilderness therapy programs out there, but most people are not aware that they exist and or can't afford them. So
Mhm.
that's a little bit of my piece.
We jumped into the philosophical side way faster than I thought we would. So I appreciate all of this, and I have a few ideas of things that I know that I want to be covering here. But let's talk about the system itself for just a moment. And you may or may not have experience with this system, but we hear about overloads. We hear about insurance not accepting it. We hear about if you have an underlying medical condition, it's harder to actually get hospitalized mental health care because they don't want to deal with the two things. They want to deal with the one, and that's the mental health. Um, who has experience on the traditional thought process of what's going on in the mental health arena right now? Anybody have any experience they can share with us or thoughts on it? What's going on? Okay, evidently not. So let's move into it. Yeah, Sierra. I was waiting for you, Sierra.
I know, I'm feeling kind of shy today, which is not normal. Um, so I think one of the problems that we have is the way that we train people to be in a profession. And even as I'm talking, I notice like this language is really difficult. Even your question of like, what do we do about mental health feels like what you're actually asking is, what do we do about mental illness? So even like we use health and illness interchangeably. We don't, my understanding at least is, unless it's drastically changed in the last couple of years, trauma is an elective topic for people who go into clinical spaces. There's very little information about human development. So I didn't introduce myself. Hi, I'm Sarah Frost. I work primarily with women on trauma recovery and then leadership skills. And so so much of what we're talking about today, I think, is my attempt to fill in some of these gaps. And so part of my background is human development and behavior. And that's not something, so the development piece, we know that humans are drastically impacted by the first few years of their life. That's not something that clinical path typically dives deeply into, and then the trauma piece is missing. But I think on a larger scale, okay, there's so many things. The DSM was not developed to diagnose people. It can be really coercive. There's power dynamics there. I've worked in behavioral health hospitals. I have a really poor opinion of them. I'm going to be honest. I don't think it's okay to force medication upon people, to not give them choice. And that's certainly not a trauma-informed lens either. And so there's just a lot of ways that I can see systemically, there's a lot of harm being done. And we're not, as a culture in the United States, we're not emotionally intelligent. We don't have educators who we have given the amount of training, the type of training, the amount of students that it's even possible to pay attention to notice things about. We're extremely lonely people. We're extremely disconnected people. And I would argue that started long before, technology and social media. And I think there are some clear ways that we know empirical evidence that work better, such as body-based practices, peer supports, but largely and partly because of insurance, you can't get financial support without having a diagnosis. You can't elect out of that, and unfortunately, sometimes those things are weaponized against you in our legal system, in your professional field because of stigma. And I don't know if we're going to go into what I think might be better options or not yet, but I think that there are a lot of ways that the system is re-traumatizing, even if it's simply sending the message that there is something ill or broken with an individual because they are living in a society with a lot of stress. In reality, it makes sense for a human brain and a human body to have and experience things like anxiety and depression and breakdowns and burnouts and psychosis as a whole. Feels like a whole nother realm of stigma. But those are normal things for humans to experience when there's this much stress going on in life. And I think that is not a message that is loud and clear, if being attempted at all from the system. And so I would really like to just acknowledge that happens, and that there may be a lot of people watching or even in this room who would experience that.
I come from the insurance world, and you mentioned the word, that I word, insurance, and I think a lot of what is broken stems from the current insurance system that we have, in terms of people think that that's the only course to go into, and there's not enough communication about other solutions. And I'll go ahead and throw this out now, and it's going to, I think, tie in with what Dr. Nicole is going to be mentioning in a moment, is that one of the problems that I have with saying that we have a problem with mental health is that we're confining it from the neck up most often. And the fact of the matter is there's so many other things that go into it in terms of your, not just your emotional well-being, but your physical health, what you're eating, your diet, nutrition, your occupation. I mean, there's so much that goes into this category of mental health. And yet as a society, we're focusing on whatever it is that's insurance is covering, because we're not looking outside those bounds. But with that being said, Dr. Nicole.
Hi, I did not think I was going to be putting my pharmacist hat on so early in this conversation. But I am Dr. Nicole Grams. I'm a pharmacist, functional medicine pharmacist, and also an anxiety and health coach, and among many other things. But I first wanted to kind of piggyback off of the use of medication in mental illness and how that is often presented as the first and only option, instead of, like you were kind of getting at, reconnecting the mind and the body, because we've been so decapitated, for lack of a better word, of being able to feel what we're feeling and being allowed to feel what we're feeling. We're told from a very young age, don't cry, it makes me feel sad when you cry. So then we're learning to people please from a very young age. We're learning that we can't trust our own bodies and what we're feeling. And then we start to think there's something wrong with us. And then we grow up with all these issues that we haven't addressed because there's these taboos around getting mental health help, and there's restrictions, and there's money barriers, and there's all kinds of things, right? And then from a functional medicine lens, we're not looking at nutrition to help support brain health or body health while we're at it, right? Like, oh, food doesn't have anything to do with your health, but it's definitely the food that you're eating that's causing the disease, but it certainly wouldn't help anything, right? Like there's all these like things that, I mean, there's so many different layers of areas we could address things, right? But in functional medicine, food, movement, rest, stress, and connection are the things that will help probably 85% of all of the issues that we have. Mental health not excluded from that. If we're supporting our body is going to send good signals up to our brain saying, hey, all is well, we don't need to freak out, right? But then, like, I guess from a medication standpoint and a functional medicine standpoint, we're not giving our bodies the nutrition that we need in order to support brain health and help the medications work better. Like we're missing the nutrients that are needed in order, like diet and lifestyle, our nutrition and lifestyle are the first recommendations on any medication plan. And how many of us are actually presented with any significant information on that when we start down this path of dis-ease and disease and medications to treat, right? So.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That was good. Eva.
There, I had to find the unmute. I'm Eva Venari, and I am a nutritional counselor. So riding on the coattails of what was just said about nutrition, my work involves displacement of toxins that as they're leaving the body can actually trigger emotional responses. And I don't know if you can hear that. I've got a helicopter and police yelling outside, perfect timing. Anyways, we're good. So it's just me getting distracted. That's fine. But I have recently heard feedback from a lot of different clients. They'll text me and as part of their support, hey, Eva, I'm feeling really emotional. Could this be a detox process? Could this? Absolutely. So just in the same way that chemicals from outside of us, taken as a drug, pharmaceutical, or street, however, there's a lot of people self-medicating, and all of them have an effect on the body that triggers emotional responses, that they're not separate from us. And so when we talk about mental health, depression, like one of the very first things that I was working with a psychologist here in Los Angeles, she says, Eva, this work that you're doing with mineral balancing is so profound that anybody who comes to me for depression should just come to you first to get their body out of the way physically, get the minerals balanced, and then we can work on what's going on up here. Because she was finding as a psychologist that while in the previous decade or so, it was being led as a community of people to get back to the holistic way, away from drugs, but that's changed, it's shifted. So it's a lot of anxiety for me that gets stirred up. Well, now we have another hurdle to overcome if we have the what's considered traditional medicine treatment for these types of not even disorders, just ways of being in the moment. It's like, how can we get out of that if we're stuck on medications? It's like, I think how we think about what medication is for is yet another issue. And I think we touched on that briefly, but it's such an important part of a healing journey. And it's a shame that we miss it, and we miss the nutrition side of it so often.
I think that's a really important step, and you guys have both made some valid arguments that really the first step in well-being should be, let's find out what's going on inside the body first. Where are we? What's lacking? Things like that before we start moving into some of the other things. The pulling out the white pad. Sorry, Nicole, but pulling out the white pad and writing a prescription for something. It's doing a true exploration of it. Who else wants to contribute to this part? Okay, let's talk about accessibility. In the current system right now, most of my world is around employee benefits and of course insurance programs and we hear about it a lot in the workplace of the need to have better mental health support, particularly after what we've been through in the last 2 years, and getting programs in place for employees, making sure that they have the help that they need. A lot of self-care has been talked about. I found an interesting statistic today, and I want to share it with everyone. So let me pull it up real quick. This was a study that was done, 2021 is when it was published, a benchmarking survey. And there was something that was just very shocking to me in some ways, but I don't know why I was so shocked on it. If you look over on the right-hand column, it showed that 87% of the organizations in this survey offered emotional and mental well-being services for the employees. But do you see the percent that actually used them? 23%. So my question to all of you is, how do we normalize seeking the help that we need? Because that's another thing, is that we need to make this normalized. It shouldn't be a stigma for a lot of people. And it is a stigma for a lot of people. It obviously is on these kind of statistics, but how do we normalize the mental health? Do we change what type of services are brought in so that it's a broader approach, whole body approach to it? Nicole, let's go.
The first thing that came, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yep.
The first thing that came to my mind was talking about our own experiences with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's certainly what has helped clients find me that need me,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm not trying to hide the fact that I sometimes have I'm able to like nip it at a mild depression, but I still experience all these things. And this past weekend was just like another example of like, even the people that look like they have it together don't have it together. And I had a therapist for a long time. The only reason I don't right now is because she moved on and I didn't want to have to re-explain my story, and I'm doing pretty good right now. But also talking about our own experiences and how we all have emotions, I think is a great place to start.
I think it is too. Dina.
I was going to start with one thing, and then Nicole kind of fired that up too. And that's, to your point, even looking for someone who I might want to work with in the traditional therapy realms. I mean, I know my mother's like a Methuselah of therapy. She's been, got her master's when I was 5. So we're talking in the 70s. And the ethics often prevent therapists from sharing their own stories, which is unfortunate. I mean, yes, you don't want to go into session and it's all about the therapist and projecting, but at the same time, that connection and understanding that those folks are real people and also have their own challenges at times. So there's not a lot of peer support within the therapy realms. First of all, you have to really seek it out. And then in terms of the percentage, I think not only is there the stigma piece, but also, it kind of goes back to, inner realm stuff around not being worthy of it. Of course, people not finding the time, putting themselves last because of all of the pressures, most of which in many cases are put on them by the very same corporations who say, hey, we're a great company. We're giving you access to all these benefits, except that they're working them to the bone. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, this is more systemic than beyond the mental health sector to begin with. This is an entire systemic issue, particularly again, certainly in the Western cultures, of production, 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 manifest, manifest, manifest. Even for those of us who are coaches and work for ourselves, it's like it's all about manifesting, and it's all about kind of I. It's not necessarily about like, how about we simplify and say enough, I have enough, and I need to take care of myself and put some energy into that. And so that's where I also think some of those numbers are
Yeah.
off.
Well, I'm going to agree with you. I believe the numbers are off, and it's for a couple of different reasons. Let me take you back to the early days of You Define Wellness, when we were getting our name out there. I suddenly started having a lot of psychotherapists wanting to join our network, and I didn't understand it. I'm a reformed insurance person. It's covered under insurance in my world. I couldn't understand why anyone who was in an occupation that was accepting insurance, and it was covered by insurance, particularly in the mental health arena, why they would want to join our network. And you know what they said to me? About 50% of our clients refused to allow us to bill their insurance. They do not want the insurance company or their employer to know, or they might be in an occupation where they would have to have, it would be disclosed, because like airline pilot type of a thing. So they didn't want to have that disclosed. So I know that that number has to be skewed. And that's part of the problem, is that people aren't wanting to obtain these services through the workplace, and yet they're having to pay for it out of pocket on their own. And it's a trial for them, and they still have no good path to follow, that they're having to find their own way through it. And that's, so they're going with the traditional routes of what they know. Natalie, and then Betsy, I'm going to call on you after Natalie, because I know you've got good things to say and I want to have them brought out. So Natalie, go ahead.
Yeah, there were a couple of things, thank you, that came to my mind while everybody was talking. And one is that there is still a stigma, and it's interesting if we're looking at it from a global perspective, because a couple years ago, I did some research. I do not think that this is current now, but I believe there are some of the highest numbers of psychiatrists, for example, are in the United States. So in the United States, it's this interesting dichotomy between people not wanting to admit that they're going to a therapist or a psychologist, while on the other hand, everybody has one. And, you know, even kids have a therapist. It's like, it's a very interesting dichotomy that is happening. And then also listening to everybody else, what seems to be some of the approach is still the idea of one size fits all, and it doesn't work. You know, years ago, I went to a therapist. I was there twice, and I just felt like, you have no clue who I am and what I'm doing. So let's just cut to the chase. I'm not coming back. Because, you know, she made me do little things. And I'm like, no. Plus, I'm intuitive and spiritually inclined. So I was like, no, you don't have a clue, because we're not looking at the whole person. We're saying, oh, I see something on an X-ray, so that's the problem. No, it goes to what everybody's been saying. Look at the whole person, and then figure out what is good for that one person. So somebody might need to see, you know, Nicole, somebody might need to see Eva, somebody might need to, everybody needs something else, especially because in the time that we're living in, we realize that everybody has had some trauma. So it's almost like now everybody's talking trauma, and thereby I think it gets, I don't want to say it, it gets watered down as well, because now everybody has a problem, everybody has a trauma. You know, it's like, if you don't have a trauma, now you're the bad person. So it's like we're going back and forth versus just saying, be you, and then figure out what works for you. You know, meditation to calm yourself doesn't work for everybody. Some people have to go to a shooting range to calm themselves down. Completely opposite. But we're forgetting that that is key. And the last thing on a positive note that I'll mention is that we just had an experience here where a doctor could have said, oh, yeah, no, I'm going to do the surgery. No problem. I'm going to. And she said, you know, I love doing surgery. Absolutely. I love doing surgery. But why don't we try something else first? Why don't you try elevating your head when you go to sleep. So she went completely the opposite because she had looked at the whole person. This was not me, but somebody close. So she had looked at the whole person and said, be kind of crazy to go in. I mean, I'm trigger happy, but no. So it's like, no, let's pull back. So I think that is a big problem, that we're no longer individualizing who we're talking to.
We do. And kudos to that doctor for seeing that there were two sides to everything. I met with someone who was a plastic surgeon last week, and she used to be a plastic surgeon, but now she's focusing on the inner work. And I asked her why, and she said, I loved being a plastic surgeon. I absolutely was so good at it. It was fantastic. And I had a client who went through a liposuction, and within a short period of time, he gained back 50 pounds because I hadn't worked on the inside with him at all. And look at all these heads nodding. You all know what I'm saying. It's kind of cool. Betsy, I know you've got some wisdom that you need to share with us.
Everything is just so on point with everything that I hear every day and see every day. One of the things that I see with California, particularly what I hear in the Central Valley, we don't have funding for mental health. We have housing for people who need mental health, but they won't follow the rules. I've put strange little feelers out into the universe about when people are having one of their good episodes and can remember they're supposed to be on their medication, maybe they could sign an implant consent. Whole different style of pharmacy. Going back to insurance, it's an outcome based. If I do that surgery, I can see, if I give you this medication for an infection, we can see the results. They don't show up necessarily in the mental realm. So much of it is people's, and it was mentioned earlier, we just are so busy and we just don't have, we're so dependent on what other people think of us. That's where the interesting, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Betsy Champ. I'm an energy worker, certified in Reiki, pranic, biofield, and access consciousness, beginning levels. And that has drawn me into where, as a teenager, and this was really a touching session today, because, I can forget my story was so full of sadness and darkness as a teenager. I literally was contemplating suicide. Mm-hmm. I have friends who have attempted suicide. I have friends whose family members have successfully completed suicide. And it still doesn't address that everything is, and we have so many professions here, so much of everybody's working together. This is a great group because everybody is literally, it's part this, part this, part this. This is what I do. I'm going to send you over here because this person, yeah. And a lot of it is stigma. I deal with a lot of people now that I can use Reiki on them to deal with some of their emotional traumas, and they don't have to report it at work. It's been really a catch-22. I also have a friend that I have sworn that I would not 5150 him. That's a hard, but that also allowed him to have a little bit more trust in me and be able to use some of the protocols. But one of the things, yes, it's about finances. What I've chosen to do is I have a group that I have started working with that is really work-related stress and trauma and drama at work. I'm doing just a free healing session for them. For some of the sexual traumas, I'm working on that group. These are not identified groups. It's just like, oh, we had this conversation. Would you like for me to include you in this group? Because so much of it, if we even go back to the homeless, it's the lack of the ability to thrive. That is an energetic process in our very body's energy. And I'm going to pull politics in. I'm very disappointed with the last election. I had a friend running for city council. He was defeated, but we had already been talking about some of the things that I would like to talk to him about alleviating the homeless,
Mhm.
because I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, it's all on you.
Oh, I thought I heard someone
You're good.
start a comment. So I so appreciate working with all of the care and compassion and energy that is in you, Define Wellness.
Mm.
And I totally understand why therapists won't bill. But when I was a teenager, I went to a therapist a couple of times and said, yeah, this is not for me.
Mhm.
And if it's not for me poking in my head, nobody else is going to want that. And that's why I've been drawn away from traditional therapy
Mhm.
into energetic therapy, because someone may have a pain in their body. And when we're able to release that pain, it starts releasing a trauma, and we don't have to rehash the
Yeah.
trauma, which so often re-triggers the trauma.
I want to make sure that we're clear about one thing, is that I am not against traditional therapy. I think that there's a place for everything, and it's not the path. It's not the end all be all. It's not the solution for everything, and so we have to be open to broadening our definition of how do we work with this. I want to move to Sierra right now, because Sierra, I know you mentioned in your initial talk, or when you spoke earlier, that you had solutions, you had ideas for solutions and things like that. And I know, with the perspective that you come from, that you have some interesting thoughts that you want to share as to where you think that this should all go.
Thanks. I I think all of these modalities are great. I kind of subscribe to the same opinion that different things can help different people at different times. And then I think there's a fundamental missing piece. So the first thing I would love to see is that we start teaching people what their nervous system is. And, I shared my background is in human development. It was a background going into education. I was a teacher for public schools for 10 years. And we didn't do that. Most people learn like, this is your brain, it's attached to your spine, and that's your nervous system. Congratulations. But we don't learn about how emotions are physiologically processed. We don't learn about how DNA holds memory. We don't learn about not even things that maybe some people would classify as metaphysical, but like direct, I want to say science-based. I don't mean to say that metaphysics can't be science-based either, but I'm trying to speak to the lens of how we kind of see it in general. So education about what the nervous system is and how your brain functions and how to take care of it, because we know very well what trauma does to the brain, and we know how to undo that trauma. We know how to change your brain, how it's wired, how it's built. There's thousands of studies about it. And then what I also think would both help to shift the system of mental wellness or brain health, as well as the stigma around it, is some more models of peer support. And partly I'm speaking to this in a white body, because there's a lot of different models from Indigenous people, from Black bodied people that work in other cultures, that have worked in our country throughout history, that have kind of been squashed, and I see, and hopefully other people see, starting to pop up again. And the information I know about peer supports is that they work really well. It takes away some of that power dynamic. So most counselors are women. Most psychiatrists are men. And those are usually white-bodied people. So even less are, non-binary, not in that gender black and white spectrum or in a body of culture. And so to even when we're talking about access or lack of access, I think, I apologize if I am wrong, but I think most people in this room right now live in white bodies, and there's a whole nother issue of access for those of us who don't. And so being able to do things that are more like peer-led with support until those people, you know, feel like they are ready on their own and have those skills. Number one, they'll learn the skills. They can learn about their nervous system. They can learn how to support other people, and it becomes normalized to talk about what's going on. I grew up as a gifted child, but everything I needed was really missed because it was all emotional intelligence. It was all wrapped up in trauma. And so I often will talk about my straight A student syndrome or my sass in getting out into the world as an adult and going like, wait a second, this is excruciating. And you all told me that it was going to be this way and I could do it so easily. And now I'm completely failing. And I think it takes a lot of courage. And as many have spoken today, there are real life consequences for being outspoken about what we all go through, anyone with a human brain and a human body. So when you can have access to that, I think it's really important to acknowledge that number one, that's a privilege. And number two, I think it's a responsibility that we do speak at those times when we have access, because not everybody does. So yeah, so understanding the nervous system, understanding human behavior, that might be a big ask. But more peer supports that take away some of these power dynamics and hierarchies that we see, you know, across the board in all systems. And yeah, I have a lot more ideas, but I'm going to stop there so that all of the other glorious brains have space here. Thank you.
Thank you for that. You know, and just so you guys know, I understand that people are hearing my smoke alarm chirping behind me, and I'm trying to get my office door closed, but I don't want to get up and leave and go do that. So I apologize if you're hearing it. It is me. This is what happens when you're live, right?
Mine is also chirping, Denise. So it could also be me.
Oh, yours is chirping too?
Some of us have chirping. Some of us have anxiety, and some of us experience chirping smoke alarms.
Okay. Well, maybe it's a message you need to pay attention to. I have no misconceptions about this conversation today. I know that it's not going to be something that is immediately going to be changing the world. My goal of having this conversation today is to start talking, redefining. When we're saying there's a problem with mental health and they're talking about access and care and things like that, finding it, really dialing into what is it that we're talking about? What is the problem that needs addressed? There's things that we can't solve. We can't solve the hospitalization intake process and who they'll take and who they won't. We can't solve the fact that there are not enough therapists in the world that are on somebody's insurance plan. We can't solve those things. What we can do is we can raise the vibration. We can start having the conversations out there as health and wellness professionals of a variety of modalities to be saying there are other things to be considered in the entire equation. Maybe it's going and working with these 87% of the companies that offer emotional well-being support, where only 23% of the employees are engaging in it, and bringing to them other thought processes and other concepts and other ideas that they can implement into the workplace, which is what we're doing at Unifying Wellness. And we invite any employer who's watching this that wants to learn more about some of the things that we do to go to our website, unifyingwellness.com. We'll help you out, and we'd love to have that conversation with you. But what I'd like to do now is we're going to move into final thoughts as to anything that you want to share, the final thoughts out there. And then we have a very special thing at the end. I like to end with a grounding exercise of some sort. And Eva Venari has a fantastic meditation for us that we will do at the close. But I want to give you all an opportunity to share some final thoughts. We're going to do it in the order of hands being raised. So who wants to go first? Okay, Ed Bostic.
I've been listening to everybody and thank you so much. Really enlightening conversation, wonderful perspectives, different modalities, different backgrounds, all those wonderful things that make the soup so rich and give people the opportunities to choose for themselves rather than institutions assign them to various modalities or therapists for that matter. I've been doing this for about 20 years and I do this differently this year than I did last year. I do it differently than I did 5 years ago. And tomorrow I'll probably be different than I am today. There's still some go-to places that I really enjoy using archetypal energies. The Jungian approach, indigenous peoples through the Mankind Project, the liminal space, Robert Moore, all of those kinds of things that I'm sure we all tap into and everything. But I find myself just being myself now. I don't bring a particular, trauma-informed thing from NICAM or Dan Siegel window of tolerance. I just don't do those kinds of things anymore. I just kind of engage and am there for the person or the people that I'm working with. And it just seems to be our natural, I think, our proclivities. I would even call it our callings. We're all sitting here talking about such impassioned experiences that we have, and we're talking from our heart. And you know this, here's a plug. I just got my trademark, Grow from the Heart. And so, but we are talking from our hearts, not just, this part of ourselves as we've kept pantomiming through this conversation today. But it is part of this, I think, this new understanding. But I don't think it's coming from our world. I think it's coming from our clients' world that we're understanding this stuff. It's not the book learning. It's certainly not the DSM-5 or 6 or wherever we are now on that. It is us learning from our clients to do better at our work. And for that, I'm really blessed. And that's why I think I change all the time because of my clients.
I love that. I love it. Who else has final thoughts? None? Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, okay, Natalie. And then we'll go to Nicole. So Natalie first.
Okay, well, I think we were at the same time.
Close.
I think I agree with a lot that Ed just said. I think if we are doing our heart's work, we are evolving every day. And that is, I think, our challenge, to evolve every day, to learn every day. Whether, I add another healing modality, or I use a different card, or I use a different stone, or I get myself read from Eva or with Betsy, it doesn't matter, but we learn also by engaging in it. And so I think the biggest thing really is, and it seems that we agree, that a person is an individual with his or her own needs. And therefore, we need to look at it as such. That means we have to take into account where they're coming from, what experiences they've had, what they do or don't have access to. And I want to point out something that Sierra said that is so important. A lot of, for example, the nutritional aspect is directly related to socioeconomics. How many jobs do you have, and how much time do you have left to buy the food and make the food? There have been lots of studies about that. That again, especially in the United States, is related to ethnicity and color of skin. So there are all these interwoven aspects. And having been married to an African American and having very close ties to Native Americans, it's like I see a lot of that, plus my European background, where on the one hand, you have a lot of issues, and on the other hand, we all live so close, we can't have issues. So the access and the understanding is very different. The understanding or the agreement that certain things are rights and privileges, I think because of the unique historical creation of the United States, is a bit different. In most European countries, you have access to healthcare, period. If you don't earn money, you still get access to healthcare because it's differently oriented. So there are the cultural aspects as well, which means all of those things we have to take into account. And a lot of people don't want to rehash what they've been through. So I think that's where it comes in, where we can help with our energy healing, with our conversations, and understanding and appreciating them as they are, versus, oh, you have ADHD, oh, you have this. No, forget about the labels. Let's talk as a human being. That's what I'm getting, what everybody is saying here. And sometimes we do need medication, and then I'd rather go to Dr. Nicole than anybody else because I know she'll have an open mind. But we need to really look at everything as a person and then decide what do we need to work on. So I think that's really amazing, and it does connect to the mental health, because when I'm feeling fat, then I'm going to get depressed. But when I eat well and I don't eat too much sugar, and then I look at myself, and then I go to manifestation. So it's very well rounded. So thank you for this conversation.
So I just wanted to have a couple of thoughts on kind of tying off of being yourself. And when you find who that is for you, and I'm still searching, even though I have found pieces of me that are very, very much me, taking those steps can be really scary and really challenging. And it's one of the most liberating things that you can possibly do if you're willing to feel terrible in the process. But also along those lines, finding the ways that work for you from a mental health standpoint might not follow the norm. And that's also terrifying. And that's why I love being a part of the You Define Wellness Network, because we all have a very different perspective on what health looks like. And that's what we're here to help people find, is literally their path to wellness. And also just a general message to everyone out there. There are people out there like us, more than just in the You Define Wellness Network, that are making change happen every day. And if you start opening your eyes and you're open to new opportunities, you will find more people and you'll find your path.
100% agree. Thank you very much for that. Absolutely. Last call for final thoughts. Raise your hand. Okay, Dina, and then we'll go to Sierra.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, Denise, and everyone here. And my first time meeting many of you, so I'll be reaching out to all of you individually so we can connect. But, I think, it's Ed said it about all the modalities and what you just said, but many of us are here to hold your hand and walk the journey with you, not tell you what to do, not give you advice. But from perhaps lived experience, and to honor, first of all, I love the fact that the term psychotherapy actually means care for the soul. It is not about what's happening up here on a biological level, but I think the systems have forgotten about that a little bit. And that a big part of what many of us do that is not necessarily honored in our cultures in any of the systems is the ability to actively and deeply listen. And, you know, to your point, Nicole, of finding out and remembering, I always call it, it's like who you are isn't lost. We've just forgotten it. And to learn to love both the shadows and the light. We are not going to fix our shadow. It's here. It's with us. It's, you know, we have little internal dualities. When we learn to love all of that for ourselves into wholeness, then I think that's where we can all just elevate ourselves together.
Wonderful. Sierra.
Yeah, so I have two last thoughts. The first for people who are watching and who might be feeling like they are, I don't know, like they don't make sense or they're running into walls with their brain health. I guarantee that you make sense and keep going. There's mutual aid groups for practical help, and also, if you are trying to support someone who might have some brain illness happening, I think there's also a lot of support out there for you to look for a circle or just scroll the internet and see what's out there and talk to people about their experience before you engage or choose, you know, to do something, of course. But I just would feel wrong leaving without saying to those people that there's nothing wrong with you. You're a human with a brain and a body, and you make sense. And then I think for us as practitioners in this room and listening in, I just want to encourage all of us, myself included, to continue to interrogate what we're doing. That discomfort is a healthy thing to feel. And at this point in time, like in my work or maybe just in my life in general, if I'm not slightly uncomfortable, I'm probably doing something wrong. So yeah, those are my last thoughts. Thanks so much, everybody.
And there's something that you said that I wanted to piggyback on, and that is that if you don't know where to start, yes, start looking, you'll find things that come your way. But one of the things that we do at You Define Wellness, go to our website, and here's the reason why. Go to the wellness resources, and you can find a bunch of professionals. But if you can't find someone that you're not sure what you need, contact us. And I am always getting inquiries from people saying, here's what's going on with me. I don't know where to start. Now, I'm a reformed insurance agent. I'm not a healer. I got a bunch of healers though. So what I do is I go to our providers and I'll say, here's the person's information. Here's what they're looking for. I keep their name out of it, so it is confidential. And I ask them to say who works with this situation, and they will speak up. I would do it on a Facebook group. It's private, but I'll take their Facebook posts and I will send them to you so that you can hear what the providers had to say based on the words that you shared with me. And then if there's somebody who resonates with you, you can reach out to them. And that is one thing that we do. So, and I'm more than happy to help you in that particular arena. Okay, last call for final thoughts. Okay, with that, we have a special treat here. We're going to move into Eva Venari with the Elevate Institute has a grounding meditation for us. And so Eva, I'm giving you this stage.
Thank you. And those of you who have those smoke alarms, thank you for staying muted. Again, Eva Venari with the Elevate Institute, and I'm going to introduce a meditation to you called Max Meditation. It's part of a greater system. It can be a 60-minute long meditation, but don't worry, I won't be captivating you for that long. And to just ride on Nicole's coattails about how sometimes the journey is painful, Yes, my tagline is feel great in your body. What I should say is feel great in your body eventually. And so on that note, I know that sometimes, many times, I used to tease my clients, if you can't meditate for 5 minutes because the nervous system is so on, the cortisol release is so real, we have a hard time. I would say, if you can't meditate for 5, do it for 10. That's impossible. So if 5 minutes is too hard, so we're trying to get to it the wrong way. And this is an introduction. Max meditation is something that came in as a combination. I'm a Reiki practitioner as well, and I use this to calm myself and to make myself the clear conduit that's required to bring in that energy of Ensophic Ray. So this is a combination of yoga, mind aerobics, combined with modern techniques of psychology, and even neuro-linguistic programming. So I'll guide you through that. 2 different systems. There's 5 in total. I will introduce 2 of them to you today. One is the relaxation, and the next one is the passive meditation. And feel free to use this yourself. It's meant to help train your body, your cells. I call it cells are listening. Cells are listening to you speak with your mouth. This is part of being able to manifest through the spoken word to your body. You ready? So everybody is sitting. When we want to connect with ourselves, we sit when we meditate. When we want to connect with the consciousness of everyone else, the collective, we lay down. Those are the 2 different things to remember. Okay, so in sitting, feet flat on the ground, not tiptoed or crisscrossed. And then hands can be just the tops of your hands resting peacefully as you can on the tops of your thighs. If you want to close your eyes, you're more than welcome. It's easier to do so. And then concentrate just on your breathing initially. And we're going to do this to tune into the body and teach it to listen to us. It takes control too often. And this is our opportunity to retrain our subconscious. So we're going to go into the relaxation. Take 3 deep breaths. In through the nose, out through the mouth. In through the nose, out through the mouth. The body cannot relax until we can quiet the mind and the body together and getting it to unrest, out of that unrest. One more deep breath. And out through the mouth. Let the body relax each time you breathe. Breathe in good energy and light. Breathe out negativity, worry, and stress from the body. Now let's start commanding your body to relax. You can repeat this out loud wherever you are. I'm going to start with the feet. Feet, relax. Say each command 3 times. Feet, relax. Feet, relax. Moving up the body. Legs, relax. Legs, relax. Legs, relax. Hips, relax. Hips, relax. Hips, relax. Lower body and back, relax. Lower body and back, relax. Remember to breathe. Chest, relax. Chest, relax. Shoulders, relax. Shoulders, relax. Shoulders, relax. Hands, relax. Hands, relax. Hands, relax. Arms, relax. Arms, relax. Arms, relax. Neck, relax. Neck, relax. Neck, relax. Face and head, relax. Face and head, relax. Face and head, relax. Mind, relax. Mind, relax. Mind, relax. Now imagine yourself to be in the most relaxed state you have ever experienced. Engage your senses as we move to the passive meditation. I want you to visualize a huge, fast and furious river running through your mind. Let the river cleanse your mind of all thoughts. Hear the sound of the water. Feel its temperature. Feel the surrounding air. The river flows fast and furious at first, allowing your thoughts to be swept away by the river. As the mind empties and the thoughts become less, the river starts to settle down and become more quiet. Notice the difference. See the river run into the ocean, into the vast eternity, infinite and wide. The river has cleansed your mind of all thoughts. You can return to being quiet, both inside and out. And if you find more thoughts coming up, go back and use the river to clear your mind. You can repeat this as many times as you need to. And remember, if you find more thoughts coming up, go back and use the river to clear your mind. From here, slowly come back to reality. Start to feel your body. Feel your feet and legs come to life. Wiggle your toes. Now feel your main body come to life. Feel your head and your face come to life. Slowly open your eyes, fully alert and aware, remembering everything.
All right. Eva, I'm a noodle. I feel very relaxed after that. Thank you very much for that meditation, that gift of that. I want to say final thank yous to everyone who participated in the conversation today. I thank you for being here, taking time out of your day to lend your expertise to us. And for those of you who are watching, whether it be with us live on Facebook or as our recording, thank you also for listening to us and helping start the conversation of some things that we can be doing different when we're hearing out there, and things that we could say differently when we're hearing people say we need to fix mental health. It's a start. So with that being said, have a wonderful day. We hope to see you at our next event.